To order. Sergeant Arms will please secure the chamber doors. Members, please take your seats. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. President.
All right, Senators, on this Tuesday, March 4th, we have Chaplain Washington Johnson II, a retired U.S. Navy captain. He is from the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Fort Meade, Maryland, guest of the distinguished senator from the 32nd District. Please rise for the invocation.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we come before you at the start of this legislative day in the Senate of Maryland, acknowledging your divine presence among us. We ask your abundant blessings upon the leadership of all members of this chamber. Grant them wisdom, clarity, and understanding in their deliberations, and guide their hearts and minds with sound judgment, compassion, and justice for the well-being of the people of Maryland. We also ask that you would watch over and protect the men and women of our armed forces and their families, keeping them safe and strong in their service. Lord, we hold in our hearts the vision of peace and unity described by the prophet Isaiah, when nations will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks, the day that you will make all things new, and a world where no earthly boundaries will separate us, and where, as the prophet Isaiah also wrote, the wolf and the lamb shall feed together. When we conclude this day and reflect privately, may we find satisfaction in knowing that you have been with us, guiding our efforts and decisions in faith, hope, and trust. We offer this prayer in the name of the eternal and everlasting one. Amen.
Recognizing the senator from the 32nd District.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank Pastor Johnson today for his invocation. Pastor Johnson's retired U.S. Navy chaplain, but is currently the director of Adventist chaplaincy in Columbia and lives in Fort Meade. So thank you very much, Pastor.
Excellent, thank you. And without objection, we will journalize the pastor's wonderful remarks this morning. Thank you so much. All right, has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 40 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland is now in session. We do have a special guest today. Let's hear from our majority leader. We have some, come on in.
Yes, Mr. President, we have Clifford is joining us today. This is Read Across America Day. I think a good number of us brought books to be distributed to our local schools, and we always like to honor Clifford.
Excellent. We have a resolution. The clerk
Can we have that read, please?
will read the resolution in full.
Be it hereby known to all that the Senate of Maryland offers its sincerest congratulations to the Maryland State Education Association in recognition of Read Across America Day. Congratulations on the 27th anniversary of the Read Across America program, celebrating a nation of diverse readers. The entire membership extends its best wishes on this memorable occasion and directs this resolution be presented on this 4th day of March 2025.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President.
Has everyone recorded their vote? If so, the actually, Chair, in explaining his votes, also just want to welcome Paul Lemley and Nikki Woodware, who are joining Clifford, and thank you them for their great work for on an everyday basis, but especially today on this 27th Read Across America Day. Thank you all so much for being here, and we appreciate you. Thank you. The clerk will take the call. To the Maryland State Education Association for the 27th anniversary of the Read Across America program and Read Across America Day, the Senate of Maryland unanimously celebrates your work and thanks you for your contributions to our state. Congratulations. Now, don't get in any trouble there, Clifford, you know. Thank you. All right, let's see, do we have any other announcements? Any announcements? Yes, Senator from the Lower Eastern Shore.
Good morning, Mr. President, friends and colleagues in the Senate. I am absolutely delighted to welcome the members of the Maryland Federation of Republican Women. They are accomplished, caring, and effective women leaders, and they care and work so hard for our communities, our state, and our nation. Please welcome them to Annapolis today.
Welcome, welcome. Good to see you all. Thank you very much. All right, additional announcements, other announcements? Or introductions, excuse me. Yes, Senator from Baltimore County.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I am not sure where they are, but I believe we have a big group today from Beth Tefillah School.
Beth Tefillah, are we here?
Or Benos Yisrael, maybe?
Welcome to
No? All of the above. Today is many non-public schools are joining us, students from there, to learn about the process and to engage in a variety of advocacy. So we really appreciate your being here and know that you will continue to be civically involved. Thank you.
Welcome, welcome. Hope you enjoy seeing democracy in action today. All right, let's see, any other introductions? Any other introductions? If not, are we ready to jump in today? We got a lot of work, so let's get started. So we consider the reading of the journal from the prior legislative day. We have a message from the governor. The clerk will read the message.
Dear Mr. President, pursuant to the authority conferred on me by Article 3, Section 52, Subsection 5 of the Constitution of Maryland, and in accordance with the consent of the House of Delegates, duly granted, I hereby submit Supplemental Budget Number 1 to House Bill 350, Senate Bill 319 in the form of an amendment to the budget for the fiscal year ending in June 30th, 2026. Supplemental Budget Number 1 affects previously estimated funds available for budget operations as shown in the following summary statement. Sincerely, Wes Moore, Governor.
All right, message having been read is ordered journalized. Senators, this is supplemental budget number 1 from the executive. Now that it's been read across the desk, it will be uploaded into the floor system, so it'll be available in the budget tab on the floor system. It's a pretty lengthy one, as all of the budgets have been this year. I think we're at about, 32 pages. So lots of different pieces moving here and there. It'll be on the floor system. Please be sure to take a look, and we will refer the supplemental budget to the Budget and Tax Committee. All right, let's go ahead and start with the Committee on Finance today. We have a number of second readers, so let's go ahead. We're going to have alcohol day in the Senate, but not in the fun way on this Fat Tuesday. We're going to be doing it in the legislative way. So clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 788, Senator M. Washington, Baltimore City Alcoholic Beverages, 43rd Alcoholic Beverage District, Class B, D7, licenses favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the Vice Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 788 is a Baltimore City alcoholic bill in the 43rd Legislative District, authorizes several Class B D7 licenses in the specific locations in the district. Conditions include at least 51% of the average daily receipts come from sale of items other than packaged goods, an MOU with the Greater Remington Improvement Association, and no separate packaged goods department. The bill has the support of Baltimore City delegation. The 2 amendments extend the Class C license for Loyola College. I move the amendments and adoption of favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 788 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 800, Dorchester County Senators, Dorchester County Alcoholic Beverages, Arts, Beer, and Wine License, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the senator from the 37th as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 800 establishes an arts, beer, and wine license in Dorchester County and authorizes the Board of License Commissioners to issue the license to issue the license to a nonprofit or a for-profit retail business that, number one, engages in the display and sale of original artwork, and number two, is located in an arts and entertainment district. There's 2 amendments. The first one is technical, and the second one authorizes the board to issue an arts, beer, and wine license to an establishment that is within 300 feet of a place of worship or a school if the board receives written consent from the place of worship or school. There is no fiscal impact. There's no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 800 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 802, Dorchester County Senators, Dorchester County Alcoholic Beverages, Venue, Beer, Wine, and Liquor License, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the senator from the 37th as the floor leader.
My button wasn't working. I apologize, Mr. President. Colleagues, Senate Bill 802 establishes a venue, beer, wine, and liquor license in Dorchester County and authorizes the Board of License Commissioners to issue the license to a nonprofit or for-profit retail business that hosts weddings, banquets, parties, meetings, and similar events at a venue that, one, is at least 2,000 square feet in size, number two, can accommodate at least 100 individuals, and number three, has adequate bathroom facilities. There are a couple of amendments. The first one's technical, and again, the second one authorizes the board to issue a venue, beer, wine, and liquor license to an establishment that is within 300 feet of a place of worship or a school if the board receives written consent from the place of worship or school. There's no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 802 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Just for those who are joining us, for the young folks that are seeing democracy, we don't only deal with alcohol. We're going to go to a non-alcohol one after this, but these are kind of the local ones we got to move through. So, clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 910, Caroline County Senators, Caroline County Alcoholic Beverages, Multiple Event Licenses, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the minority leader as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 910, as amended, establishes a special event beer, wine, and liquor license in Caroline County and authorizes the Board of License Commissioners to issue the license to owners of a special event venue. A license holder must purchase all alcoholic beverages from licensed wholesalers, and the license may not be transferred to another location. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 strikes language limiting the special event license to venues zoned as rural special event venues under county law, makes conforming changes, and authorizes a holder of multiple event licenses to store alcoholic beverages on a licensed premise between events. There is no fiscal impact. There is no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 910 is hereby ordered printed for 3rd reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 939, Senator Hayes, Baltimore City Alcoholic Beverages, Authorizations and Revisions, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 939 imposes a fee on expedited one-day licenses. It also establishes several new licenses, including one at Coppin State University, one on Howard Street, and one in the North Carrollton Avenue community of Hollands Market. The bill has the support of Baltimore City Senate delegation. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 limits the number of Class C per diem licenses for a person, strike a Class B license authorization, and broaden existing boundaries of limited hours within the district. I move the amendments and adoption of favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 939 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, we're going to jump a little bit to get a little variety today. Let's stick with finance, but go to 13. 13. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 26, Senator Kramer, Labor and Employment, Occupational Safety, Health, Revisions, Davis-Martinez Public Employee Safety and Health Act, favorable of two amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, many of you may recall that during the course of this past year, there was a tragic incident in Montgomery County where a corrections officer, parole and probation agent, Davis-Martinez, was sadly murdered while out doing a routine check. And sadly, his was not the only public employee's life that was lost during this past year. There are others, and there were a number of our public employees who were badly injured during the course of the past year. So the bill before you is named in memory of Agent Davis-Martinez, and the bill creates a public employee safety and health unit in the Division of Labor and Industry to enforce the expansion of the MOSH program for public bodies by enhancing notification and reporting requirements for public bodies relating to workplace violence. Public bodies will be subject to new reporting and notification requirements and new standards such as making workplaces safer to address workplace violence. The bill also establishes new penalties for public bodies and elected officials. Amendment 1 is technical. Amendment 2 is clarifying. Colleagues, the bill passed unanimously in the Finance Committee. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report. Thank you, Mr. President.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 26 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 445, Senator McCray, Department of Human Services, Federal Commodity Supplemental Food Program Administration, favorable.
Recognizing Vice Chair of the Committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 445 is a very simple bill. It transferred a federal commodity supplemental food program from the Department of Aging over to the Maryland Department of Human Services since they already administered a SNAP program. There are no amendments, there's no fiscal impact, and there was no opposition. I move a favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 445 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 474, Senator Bidel, Health Insurance, Adverse Decisions, Reporting and Examinations, favorable with three amendments.
Recognizing Chair of the Committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. There seems to be a recent problem with the number of denials that insurance carriers are presenting to our hospitals. So Senate Bill 474 adds additional reporting requirements by health insurance carriers to the Maryland Insurance Administration under the Appeals and Grievances Law with regard to adverse decisions. For a service, if the number of adverse decisions issued by a carrier grew by more than 10% in the preceding year or 25% in the preceding 3 years, the carrier must describe any changes in medical management that lead to the increase as well as any other known reasons. The Commissioner may use the information as a basis for an examination of the carrier. Amendment 1 is technical. Amendment 2 alters the information that a carrier must report to a member regarding an adverse decision by removing the name of the decision maker and requires additional information from a carrier regarding adverse decision increases. There's no physical impact. There was no opposition in the committee. I move the amendments and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 3 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 3 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 474 is ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 576, Senator Lamb, Labor and Employment Mandatory Meetings on Religious or Political Matters, Employee Attendance and Participation, Maryland Worker Freedom Act, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 576 prohibits employers from retaliating against an employee because the employee declines to attend or participate in an employer-sponsored meeting in which the employer communicates opinions regarding religious or political matters, including decisions on whether to join or support political parties or labor organizations. Employers are still able to communicate information that's required by law or conduct meetings that involve religious or political matters if attendance is voluntary. Religious corporations, organizations, or associations, or specified religious educational institutions or societies are exempt. There are no committee amendments. Move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 576 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 785, Senator Reedy, Labor and Employment Unpaid Parental Leave, definition of employer, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. My apologies. It was buried under some other bills dealing with alcohol. Apologies. Senate Bill 785 alters the definition of employer under the Maryland Parental Leave Act to exclude employers who are covered by the Federal Family and Medical Leave Act for the current calendar year. The bill specifically addresses the possibility that some employers in the state could be required to provide employees up to an additional 6 weeks of unpaid parental leave on top of the state's mandated unpaid parental leave under FMLA because of the change in the size of their company. There are no amendments, there's no fiscal impact, and there was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 785 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, we're going to go to 14, calendar 14. In finance, clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 373, Senator Bidel, State Personnel, BWI Airport, Fire and Rescue Department, Collective Bargaining and Arbitration Processes, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 373 alters the collective bargaining process for the uniformed fire employees of the BWI Airport Fire and Rescue Department by establishing binding arbitration in the event of an impasse in negotiation. Amendment 1 subjects any decision of an arbitrator related to wages to the limitation of the state budget. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 373 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 734, Senator McKay, Business Regulation Licensing Definition of Storage Warehouse, favorable.
Recognizing the minority leader as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 734 excludes a self-service storage facility from the definition of storage warehouse, thereby exempting a self-service facility from the requirement to obtain a storage warehouse license. There are no amendments. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. I wonder about data storage. That's one on this one. Interesting. Yeah. All right. Any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 734 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 754, Senator Kramer, Commercial Financing, Small Business Truth and Lending Act, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, over the last 10 to 15 years, a whole new industry of commercial lenders have come about. It's referred to as the fintech lending industry. Unfortunately, they have no regulations as we do currently have with traditional banking. The problem has been that it's the Wild West out there, and these financial lenders are taking advantage of our small mom and pop businesses. Often these small mom and pop businesses find themselves in contracts where they're paying, as it turns out, 100, 200, 3% interest on these loans, and then quickly find themselves going out of business because they cannot keep up with the payments. So the bill before you creates a regulatory framework for commercial financing transactions, including certain open-end, close-end, and sales-based financing transactions. The bill establishes disclosure requirements on providers of commercial financing, including required information on fees, finance charges, and the annual percentage rate, as well as the repayment terms. The Commissioner of the Office of Financial Regulation must adopt regulations to implement the bill. There are no amendments. The bill passed the committee unanimously, and colleagues, thank you very much. This bill passed this chamber unanimously last year. I guess got caught in an alleyway across the hallway, but we'll try to keep it on Main Street this year. Mr. President, I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Could have taken it one more to the Wall Street, Main Street. Yeah. Anyway, I know, yeah. All right, the floor leaders move for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 754 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. All right, let's go back to our Fat Tuesday calendars. Calendar 10 out of Finance. Clerk, read the first bill.
Senate Bill 17, Senator Simon Ayer, Anne Arundel County Alcoholic Beverage Licenses, Veterans Organizations, favorable with one amendment.
Recognizing the Senator from Anne Arundel is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 17 authorizes as a holder of a Class C beer, wine, and liquor license in Anne Arundel County that qualifies as a veterans organization to convert that license to a Class C veterans organization license. The bill reduces from $400 to $300 the annual license fees for Class C veterans organization licenses and authorize the Anne Arundel County Board of License Commissioners to issue application and administrative fee discounts to specified applicants. The bill also allows the holder of a Class C veterans organization license to operate on Sundays without obtaining a separate Sunday license. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. There is a letter of support from the Anne Arundel County delegation. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 17 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 636, Senator Folden, Frederick County Alcoholic Beverages Tasting Permits, favorable with one amendment.
Recognize the minority whip as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 636 converts Frederick County's beer and wine consumption permit and its BWL consumption permit into a beer and wine tasting permit and a beer, wine, and liquor tasting permit, respectively. It removes some limitations, specific limitations on the size and quantity of sample servings of beer, wine, and liquor. Instead, it substitutes the authority of the Frederick County Board of License Commissioners to regulate those quantities and tastings of beer, wine, and liquor that can be served by a permit holder to an individuals. And it will allow them to regulate the number of bottles or other containers from which the quantity is served. Amendment 1 alters the sponsorship of the bill to the Frederick County senators. There's no fiscal impact, there was no opposition, and there is a letter of support from the Frederick County delegation. So I would move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 636 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, before we read the next bill, Senator from the 40th, did you get the note? We have I think we have the Baltimore Junior Academy. Baltimore Junior Academy is with us in the gallery. If we could just give them a warm Senate welcome. Welcome to Annapolis. Thank you all for being here today. Excellent. All right, yes, clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 738, Senator Folden, Frederick County Barbershop and Beauty Salon Beer and Wine Licenses, alterations favorable with one amendment.
Recognizing Senator from Carroll County is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 738 is also a Frederick County alcohol-related bill. It increases from 5 ounces to 6.5 ounces the amount of wine by glass that can be served for on-premises consumption under a barbershop or beauty salon beer and wine license in Frederick County. So, folks, you might want to go get your hair done in Frederick County. It's going to be a lot of fun. Amendment 1 alters the bill sponsorship to the Frederick County Senators. Again, there is no fiscal impact or opposition at the committee hearing. There is a letter of support from the delegation, the Frederick County delegation. So I'd move again the amendment, Mr. President, and the favorable committee report.
All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 738 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Just as a quick note that was pointed out, it's funny with these alcohol bills. We had the growler bill that started in one location and then it goes statewide. Now we have the hair salons and the barbershops in one location, goes everywhere. And it spreads like wildfire. All right. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 744, Senator Gallion, Harford County Alcoholic Beverages, hearing notice favorable with one amendment.
Recognizing the Senator from Queen Anne's is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 744 authorizes the Harford County Board of License Commissioners to publish certain hearing notices as well as decisions on license applications and certain changes to the existing licenses in one newspaper of general circulation in Harford County or online as specified. Senate Bill 1 alters to the sponsor to be Harford County Senators. There is no fiscal impact. There is no opposition to committee hearing. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 744 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 745, Senator Gallion, Harford County Alcoholic Beverages, Performing Arts, Nonprofit Organization License, Record-Keeping Requirements, favorable.
Recognizing Senator from Kent as the floor leader.
Moving around counties. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 745 repeals obsolete references to the comptroller relating to record-keeping and reporting requirements for a performing arts nonprofit organization beer, wine, and liquor license in Harford County, and repeals the comptroller's previous authority to temporarily suspend the license without a hearing. The bill authorizes, rather than requires, the Harford County Board of License Commissioners to summons a performing arts nonprofit organization beer, wine, and liquor license holder for a hearing and impose a fine as specified. Amendment number 1 alters to the sponsor to be the Harford County Senators. There is no fiscal impact. There is no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 745 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 746, Senator Gallion, Harford County Alcoholic Beverages, Multiple Licenses, Golf Simulator Facilities, favorable with one amendment.
The Top Golf 5-iron.
2 counties left.
Yeah, recognizing the senator from Cecil.
There you go. There's got one. Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 746 authorizes the Harford County Board of License Commissioners to issue a Class GSF Golf Simulator Facility alcoholic beverage license to the holder of one or more Class B licenses. A Class GSF license must be included in the total number of 9 Class B licenses that may be issued to the same person in Hartford County. Amendment number 1 alters to the sponsor to be the Hartford County Senators. There is no fiscal impact. There was no opposition at the committee hearing. I move the amendment and the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 746 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's go to our first consent calendar of the year out of Finance. This is calendar report number 11, consent calendar 1. Clerk, read the calendar.
Report of the Committee on Finance. This is Finance Report number 11, consent calendar number 1.
Recognize the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The alcohol bills on this consent calendar are local bills, have no amendments, are supported by the relevant county Senate delegations, and pass the committee unanimously. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report of the bills on consent calendar number 1 out of Finance. Senators, please take a look. Are there any bills that senators wish to separate out? If not, question is the adoption of the favorable report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted for bills on consent calendar 1, and they are ordered printed for third reading. Let's go to the next consent calendar. Clerk, read the calendar.
Report of the Committee on Finance. Finance Report number 12, consent calendar number 2.
Recognizing chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Once again, the alcohol bills on this consent calendar are local bills, have no amendments, are supported by the relevant county Senate delegations, and pass the committee unanimously. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leaders move for the adoption of the favorable committee report for bills on consent calendar 2. Are there any bills that senators wish to separate? Going once, going twice. All right. Question is on the adoption of the report. Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted, and the bills are ordered printed for third reading. All right. As we move to the next calendar in the gallery behind me, senators, obviously we've had a lot of school visits today. We are joined by the students from the Cardinal Sheehan School and the Academy of St. Matthias in the gallery behind me. If we could give them a warm Senate welcome. All right, let's go to Committee on Education, Energy, and the Environment. It appears wasn't that fun, Fat Tuesday in the Senate? Wasn't that thrilling, exciting? Everyone feel like they've exercised their, yeah. Okay, indulgences. All right, calendar 10. Clerk, read the first bill.
Senate Bill 267, Chair, Education, Energy, and the Environment, Election Law, Petitions for the Formation of a New Political Party Process, favorable.
Recognizing the Vice Chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this is a technical bill that will make it easier for our boards of elections. If someone wants to try to start a new party, it just sets the deadline back 1 month and says that if you try it and that you fail, you have to start all over again and can't use the same signatures. There were no amendments that passed unanimously. Move adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 267 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 269, Senator M. Jackson, Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship Program, revisions.
Recognize the senator from the 41st as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a technical bill that allows part-time associate's degree students to receive the Maryland Community College Promise Scholarship Awards for up to 6 years, and then it also clarifies which programs are eligible for these awards. There are no committee amendments. There is a minimal fiscal impact, and I move the adoption of the favorable committee report. Thank you.
All right, floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 269 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 276, Senator Simonaire, Educational Equity for Service Members Act, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is one of a package of 8 bills to modernize our military laws into the 21st century. This bill generally establishes uniform definitions related to the military in the education article, general provision article, and the state government article in the Maryland Code. While many provisions update terminology, some provisions expand eligibility for benefits from active duty members of the military to all members serving in the uniformed services, including the following: informal kinship care, enrollment in public schools, expedited teacher credentialing, experiential credit towards license and certificate for providing emergency medical services, non-resident tuition exemption at public institution of higher education in the state. There were two amendments. The first is technical. The second updates educator credentialing terminology to conform to current practice and regulation by using the terms licensing and license. It also makes additional conforming changes to terminology regarding veterans. There was no fiscal impact, no opposition. I move the adoption of the two committee amendments and favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussions? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objections, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 276 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 511, Senator Henson, Public Senior Higher Education Institutions, Pregnant and Parenting Students Plan Requirement, Pregnant and Parenting Student Support Act, favorable with one amendment.
Recognizing Vice Chair of the Committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. We want all of our students in higher education to succeed, and sometimes they need a little bit of extra support, and that includes those who are pregnant or parenting. This just creates a little bit of extra assistance. It also exempts UMGC and UAB and UMCs because they don't have health centers. It also removes, there is one amendment, and it removes any extra favorability in terms of class registration. So modest bill, passed unanimously. Move adoption of the committee amendment and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 511 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 597, Senator Quarterman, Higher Education, Maryland Graduate and Professional Scholarship Program, eligible institutions.
Recognized Senator from the 41st is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill expands eligibility for the Maryland Graduate and Professional Scholarship Program to include individuals attending the Meredith School of Osteopathic Medicine. There are no committee amendments. There's no fiscal impact, and I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 597 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 602, Senator Brooks, County Board of Education Special Education Service Delivery Models Publication Requirement, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsors, the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this bill requires each local Board of Education to develop and publish on its website a list of special education service delivery models provided to parentally placed private school students within the jurisdiction of the local school system. Parentally placed private school students mean a child with a disability enrolled by the parent or guardian of the child in a private elementary or secondary school or facility, including a religious school or facility. In accordance with the relevant federal law, it does not include a child with a disability placed or referred to non-public placement by a public agency or ensure appropriate education service as provided to the child. There were no committee amendments, and there's no fiscal impact. I move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 602 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 923, Senator Guile, Public Schools, High School Sports Officiating Services Procurement Requirements, favorable with one amendment.
Recognized Senator from the Lower Eastern Shore is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 923, this bill would ensure that sports officials for boys and girls sports are paid the same rate for public high schools. Along with the equal pay, the bill requires the use of the same hiring process. It allows for combined offers, which means a local school system may require that bidders or offerers include both boys and girls officiating services in a response to a solicitation for officiating services. It also requires the same deadlines for separate bids, and it may require bid collaboration. Bottom line is equal pay and same process for both boys and girls sports when it comes to officiating. There was one amendment to add co-sponsors. The bill did pass unanimously. It has no fiscal impact, and I would move adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. On the amendment, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 923 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's stick with Triple E. This is report number 11. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 117, Senator Hester, Environment Bay Restoration Fund Septic System Upgrade Program, favorable with 2 amendments.
All right. Recognizing the bill sponsor is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, as amended, Senate Bill 117 alters priorities and expands eligibility criteria for on-site sewage disposal projects funded under the Bay Restoration Fund System Septics account. There are 2 committee amendments. The first one is technical. The second one strikes provisions that would have authorized the Department of Environment to establish performance-based funding levels and exempts related procurements by the department from the state procurement law. Those are exempted. These amendments address the concerns that we heard in the committee. The bill did pass the committee unanimously, and I urge the adoption of the amendments and move the amendments in the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 117 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Before we go to the next one, Senator from the 45th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was informed that the Catholic High School of Baltimore was in the chambers, colleagues. They're celebrating 80-plus years of educating young ladies, the future of the state of Maryland. If we could stand and give them recognition.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Great to see you all. Great to see you all. All right, clerk, will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 239, Chair, Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee, State Finance and Procurement, Local Cybersecurity Preparedness and Response Plan and Assessment repeal, favorable.
Recognizing the senator from Howard and Montgomery as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this departmental bill repeals a duplicative requirement that each county government, local school system, and local health department consult with a local emergency manager to create or update a cybersecurity preparedness and response plan. There is no fiscal note. It passed unanimously. I urge the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 239 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 244, Chair, Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee, State Government, Information Technology, Cybersecurity Revisions, favorable with 1 amendment.
Recognizing the senator from Howard and Montgomery as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This departmental bill makes clarifying and administrative changes to the state's regulatory framework governing state and local cybersecurity, and generally clarifying and distinguishing between the roles of the Department of Information Technology and the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. There is one committee amendment. This requires a report on the cybersecurity budget to be submitted to the General Assembly after the governor submits the budget. I move the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the one committee amendment and the favorable committee report. Any discussion on the amendment? Any objections? Without objection, the one committee amendment is adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 244 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 261, Chair, Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee, State Board of Public Accountancy, Sunset Extension and Report, favorable.
Recognizing Chair of the committee is the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. The State Board of Accountancy, very, very important board in our state overseeing the public accounting profession. This departmental bill extends the termination date for the State Board of Accountancy within the Maryland Department of Labor by 5 years to July 1, 2030. Maryland Labor must submit a report to the Joint Audit and Valuation Committee with information regarding the board. The bill takes effect June 1, 2025. No amendments, no fiscal impact, no opposition. Bill passed unanimously. Move adoption of the favorable committee report, Mr. President.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 261 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 275, Senator Simon Nair, Modernization of Military Laws Act, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the Senator from Maine Arundel as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is another one of the 8 bills of the package, and this is the main one that updates the structural. It's done through centralization, standardization, and modernization of our terminology. This bill generally establishes uniform definitions related to the military and the election law, general provisions, public utilities, and state government articles of the Maryland Code. While some alterations in this bill represent technical changes, there are meaningful changes. Notably, among the other provisions, the Bill 1 expands eligibility for burial in the state veterans cemetery and expands the use of mail for file candidacy in the election for all service members, and expands access to certain housing and employment privileges and protections to all service members. There were 2 committee amendments. The first was technical. The second amendment restores the honorable discharge qualifications in several articles of the code, allows for veterans benefits in the public health services, and NOAA allows members of the National Guard and Reserve to be buried at the State Veterans Cemetery, and makes further clarification and revisions to existing laws. There was no fiscal impact, no opposition to the bill. I move the favorable committee report and the amendments.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 275 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. We have Senator from Baltimore County.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd like colleagues, please join me in welcoming the young women from St. Timothy's School, which is a day and boarding school in the lovely District 11. Good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Welcome, welcome. Senator from Prince George's, was that? Nope, okay. All right, let's go ahead and clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 722, Senator Henson, Department of the Environment, Ecological Restoration, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the Senator from Prince George's as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 722 implements a recommendation of the Ecological Restoration Permitting Study Report required by legislation that we passed in 2022 to establish a definition of ecological restoration in the environmental article. There were 2 committee amendments. The first was technical. The second strikes language that would have required the Maryland Department of the Environment to update certain regulations incorporated into the bill, and the definition of ecological restoration is no fiscal impact. I move the committee amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 722 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. We are also joined by a school in the 46th District, Archbishop Borders, I believe maybe on the gallery behind me. If they could please stand and be recognized with a warm Senate welcome. Thank you all for coming in to see democracy in action. We're going to switch over to judicial proceedings. This is going to be report number 11. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 110, Senator West, Estates and Trust, Priority of Claims on an Estate, Unpaid Child Support, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. These next 3 bills all are estates and trust bills. This bill, Senate Bill 110, prioritizes the payment of unpaid child support over certain other claims on an estate of a decedent with insufficient assets to pay all claims in full. This bill places child support after family allowances in the order of payment priority and before taxes due by the decedent. There are no committee amendments. There was no opposition to the bill. The vote of the committee was unanimous. I hereby move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 110 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 126, Senator West, Estates and Trusts, Resignation of Trustee, notice favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Another Estates and Trust bill. This bill, Senate Bill 126, authorizes a trustee of a trust under the Maryland Trust Act to resign without having to seek court approval, provided that at least 30 days' notice is given to the qualified beneficiaries of the trust, the settlor of the trust, if living, all co-trustees, and any person who has a right to replace or appoint the successor to the resigning trustee. There were no committee amendments. There is no opposition to the bill. The vote of the committee was unanimous. I hereby move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Were they not allowed to resign before this?
They could resign, but they'd have to go to the court and get permission from the court. That's expensive.
Oh, I see. Oh, very good. All right. Question on the report. Any further discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 126 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 135, Senator West, Estates and Trusts, Fiduciaries, Attorney-Client Privilege, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. The third of the three bills, Senate Bill 135, establishes that unless waived by the client, a communication between an attorney and a client that acts as a fiduciary is subject to the attorney-private-client privilege, even if fiduciary funds are used to compensate the attorney for legal services rendered to the client. There were no committee amendments. There was no opposition to the bill. The vote of the committee was unanimous. I hereby move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. On the report, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 135 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's go to Report 12. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 152, Senator West, Criminal Law, Crimes Relating to Animals, Conviction and Sentencing, favorable.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now moving from estates and trust to animals. Senate Bill 152 establishes that each animal harmed in a violation of Title 10, Subtitle 6 of the Criminal Law article is a separate offense and must be deemed an individual victim for purposes of the sentencing guidelines stacking rule. The bill also clarifies that specified crimes relating to animals do not apply to either hunting or fishing activities that use the most humane method reasonably available if they're completed in accordance with state wildlife or fisheries law or regulations. There were no committee amendments. There's no opposition to the bill. The vote of the committee was unanimous. I hereby move the adoption of the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 152 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk will read the next bill.
Senate Bill 274, Senator Love, Criminal Procedure, Child Victims, Testimony in Child Abuse Cases, favorable with two amendments.
Recognizing the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, in cases of child abuse, a court may order a child victim to testify outside of the courtroom and outside of the presence of the defendant if the court finds that testifying in the presence of the defendant would cause the child victim serious emotional abuse such that the child is unable to testify. It's that last clause that's rendered the entire statute unusable. So SB 274 takes out that unable to testify. I'm sorry, it takes out, that the child victim cannot reasonably communicate. There are two committee amendments. The first is technical and adds sponsors to the bill. The second has two portions. The first portion is that the child victim be given a place within the courtroom, within the courthouse to testify that would reasonably mitigate the likelihood that the child victim would suffer emotional distress. The second portion is that the bill also establishes a requirement that the defendant have a means of privately communicating orally and in real time with the defendant's attorney who is present in the room where the child victim is testifying. Move the two amendments and the favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 274 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 421, Senator McKay, Criminal Law Destroying Funerary Objects and Cemetery Elements, Statute of Limitations and Prohibition, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognizing the senator from District 1 as the floor leader.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this amendment is a bill that existing prohibitions against the willingly destroying or damaging or defacing or removing specified features, objects, and structures in our cemeteries. It will include the willful destruction, damage, and defacement, or removal of any or other part of the grounds of the cemetery. The bill expands the existing exemption, allowing for the removal of part of the grounds of a cemetery and or burial site for the purpose of repair or replacement. The bill also extends the statute of limitations to prosecute a person from within 1 year to the offense to commit instead within 3 years, after local authorities in fact knew and reasonably should have known that the alleged violation. There were 2 amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Amendment number 2 alters the prohibition of the draft of the bill. There was favorable with these 2 amendments, so I move that the adoption of this favorable committee as amended.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the 2 committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the 2 committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 421 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Let's go to Report 13. Clerk will read the first bill.
Senate Bill 7, Senator M. Jackson, Department of Transportation, Human Trafficking Awareness and Training Response, See Someone, Save Someone Act, favorable.
Recognize the senator from the 2-5 as a floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 7, this bill requires that the Maryland Department of Transportation, in consultation with stakeholders, to develop or identify and implement a training program that includes a curriculum on the identification and reporting of suspected human trafficking. In addition, the department must require frequent public service announcements with safety information for human trafficking victims. There are no committee amendments, and I move to adopt for a favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves to the adoption of the favorable committee report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the favorable committee report is adopted. Are there any amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 7 is ordered printed for third reading. This is the year for this one. This is the year. All right, clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 618, Senator Smith, Vehicle Laws, Licenses, Identification Cards, and Moped Operators Permits, and Notation of Non-Apparent Disability, favorable with 4 amendments.
Recognizing the chair of the committee as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 618 provides for an option to have your license, identification card, or moped operator's permit to have the demarcation that you have a non-apparent disability. There were 3 amendments. 1 adds co-sponsors. The entire committee joined on board. Amendment number 2 adds Eric's ID law as the short title of the bill. Amendment number 3 is technical. And amendment number 4 requires the MVA to delete any records related to a notation on the request of the applicant, and clarifies that the MVA may not disclose such records without a court order subject to specific exceptions. I'd move for the adoption of the favorable committee report and the 4 committee amendments.
Could we potentially special order this one till tomorrow? For
Absolutely.
purposes of amendment? Is that a?
Of course.
Okay. Any objections?
Just want to lay it over, or just?
Oh, we could lay it over. That works too. If there's no objections. All right. The bill and the amendments will lie over under the rule. I'm going to get a sponsor amendment added on. All right. Clerk, read the next bill.
Senate Bill 811, Senator James, Task Force on the Creation of a Division of Returning Citizens and Expanded Re-Entry Services, Extension of Repeat Deadline and Task Force, favorable with 2 amendments.
Recognize the bill sponsor as the floor leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 811, pretty simple, extends the task force on creation of a division of returning citizens and expanded reentry services for 1 year, as well as the report that's required. There are 2 amendments, one to correct a drafting error and the other to add co-sponsors. There's no opposition, so I move for The move for the two amendments to be approved along with a favorable committee report.
Floor leader moves for the adoption of the two committee amendments and the favorable committee report. On the amendments, any discussion? Any objection? Without objection, the two committee amendments are adopted. Question now is on the amended report. Any discussion? Any objections? Without objection, the amended report is adopted. Are there any further amendments to the bill or its title? Seeing none, Senate Bill 811 is hereby ordered printed for third reading. Madam Secretary, could we please ring the bells? And if we could, Madam Clerk, if we could do a quorum call.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 44 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session. We are on third reading calendar number 21. Clerk, read the bill.
Senate Bill 264, Chair, Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee, Plant Disease Control, Nurseries, Inspection, Certification, and Licensing Fees.
Senate Bill 264 is on third reading for final passage. Any discussion? If not, clerk will call the roll.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their vote? Anyone wish to change their vote? Explain their vote? If not, the clerk will take the call. With 32 votes in the affirmative, Senate Bill 264, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. All right, that does it. The desk is clear. We got through a lot way faster than expected, so we are way ahead of schedule today, which is excellent news, excellent news. So let's check with committees. Chair of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today, Finance will hear 11 bills and will be voting right after committee meeting.
Excellent. Chair of Education, Energy, and the Environment.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'll be meeting at 1 p.m. EEE, 15 bill hearings, including one bill from the governor. He'll be testifying on an affordable housing bill, 1 p.m.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair of Budget and Tax.
1 o'clock bill hearings. We got the governor, too.
All right. Busy day for the executive. Chair of Judicial Proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have 9 bill hearings and 64 witnesses, so we'll start at 1 p.m. today.
1 o'clock in Judicial Proceedings. Let's see, other standing committees, select committees, joint committees, delegations. Yes, Veterans Caucus, Prince George's County delegation.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, Prince George's County will meet tomorrow night at 6 p.m. We have the chair of our county council, 6 p.m. Thank you.
Excellent. Yes, Chair of Montgomery County delegation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, time permitting, on Thursday, we will again reconvene for going through a few bills we still haven't finished. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's see, any further announcements for the good of the order? Yes, Senator from District 6.
Just want to let everybody know we do have Bible study tomorrow in the Neil Room at 8:30. Please come and join us. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Senator. Any further? If not, let's go ahead and do a quorum call before we adjourn.
Mr. President,
Has everyone recorded their presence? If so, the clerk will take the call. With 44 members in the chamber and a quorum being present, the Senate of Maryland remains in session, recognizing the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate of Maryland stand adjourned until Wednesday, March 5th at 10 a.m.
Without objection, so ordered. Stay safe. Have a wonderful day, everyone.